So welcome everyone to the Faculty Academic Staff Forum at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. My name is Erica Benson. I am the Executive Director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. And I have the distinct honor of introducing my colleague, Heather Johnson Schmitz, to you. She is the Manager of Grants and Contracts in our office, the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. She received her undergraduate degree from UW-Eau Claire and has a master's in higher education. She's worked in research administration in higher education and written proposals and managed multi-million-dollar grant portfolios in finance and healthcare industries. Heather has also been a proposal reviewer for a variety of federal, state, and private granting agencies. So as you can see, she is an expert on external grants and will give us the external grants 101 intro, how to start and ways to align with your professional development. So before I turn things over to Heather, I just want to mention that we will have plenty of time for discussion and questions. And so to our online viewers, I invite you to submit your questions using the Q&A feature, and our wonderful graduate assistant will read those out. And Heather, if we have questions from the local audience here, please just repeat those for the benefit of our viewers online. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Heather.
Well, thank you. And it's nice to meet some new people and have some friendly faces, and welcome to those online. So today we'll just talk a little bit about the supports that ORSP can offer folks when you're looking at external grants and starting on that journey. And then we'll also talk about how external grant seeking can really feed into and align with your professional development activities. So it's kind of a 2-for-1, if you will. So I have some things to share, but as Erica said, there'll be time for questions. I did bring candy, so there's a reward if you have some questions. So have some time to prepare. So to start out, I'll just give a little overview of who is ORSP, Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, and you can read our mission there, and it's really all about supporting the research and scholarly endeavors, faculty, academic staff, and students. We do that in a variety of ways. Those activities in the Venn diagram, everything from trying to help develop faculty, staff, students through things like this presentation today, meeting with folks one-on-one, et cetera. And then, of course, securing and administering funding, whether that be internal funds and our internal grant programs, UW system funds, and then the wide world of external funding. And then, of course, one of our goals is to advance the institution overall. Reputation, et cetera, all the good things that can come from receiving grants and the projects and research that result. So just talk through a little bit about the support that we offer as you're looking at external grants. And these will come up one by one. So we help you find grant opportunities. Sometimes it's hard to even know what's out there. You might be interested in seeking external funding, but maybe you don't know where to start, or you think, well, my area is so specific. Is there even anything out there? We can have a conversation. You can send me an email with your ideas or a few keywords, and I can do a funding search for you. We have a database on campus that's called Pivot. You also have access to that. So I can do a search. I can show you how to do a search in Pivot. A nice thing about Pivot is that you can save searches, and then you can get results in your email inbox, like on a monthly or quarterly or whatever schedule you choose. So once you set that up, it's a handy way that you'll keep getting those grant ideas in your email inbox. So helping you find those grant opportunities. And the other, of course, is once you found that opportunity, we're really here to help you look through the grant guidelines, figure out if we're eligible, figure out if this is a good alignment with whatever your project idea is, what can and can't you maybe spend this grant money on, and what do you need to think about? So we really work through those guidelines with you. Sometimes federal guidelines are like a book, so you don't have to wade through that alone. We look through those all the time and can give you the highlights. And then, of course, preparing and assembling and seeking internal approvals, and then actually submitting the grant proposal is where ORSP helps as well. We'll talk a little more about that process of submitting in a minute. Proposal feedback. So once you've written the proposal, which is really the heart of your application, it's talking all about what you want to do and why and how and all that good information. It can be really helpful to get another person's read on it, that fresh set of eyes. We're here to help with that as well. We don't necessarily have that disciplinary expertise, but I've been a grant writer, I've been a grant reviewer on everything from national to local foundation programs. So it can just bring that fresh outside eye, and also tend to really tune into the review criteria for any given program, just to try to help maximize your competitiveness. So proposal reviews are something we can help with time. If we're chatting and something's due tomorrow, that might not be feasible, but with time, we can help with reviews. Show of hands. Who loves budgets? Oh, I do have, okay, I have some friends here. But if you don't, it's okay. Here again, we help you put together your budget. You do not have to open that spreadsheet or try to figure out the fringe benefit rates or what are indirect costs and you don't have to deal with that. There again, we can have a conversation. You can just talk me through. I want summer salary and I want a couple students and I need some supplies and I want to travel to a conference. Just that, I can put together a draft budget and then we can work from there. So we try to make that a smooth, easy process and not a barrier. And so then when you get your grant, not if, when you get your grant, we take a look at those terms and conditions. So you'll get a grant award. It's some kind of an agreement. Somebody's going to give you money. They're going to expect certain things, like they might want an annual report, very common, or other terms and conditions. So we take a look at that and just make sure that you're protected, the university is protected, any students that you might have involved are protected. So for example, one clause that, sometimes is in one of these award agreements might be around publishing. And sometimes an agency that's going to give you money thinks that they should have a right to approve your publication. So if you think about that, they're basically saying you can't publish this work unless they agree and say it's okay. Well, that would be a pretty severe limitation on your academic freedom and all the good things that we're about as a university. So we look for any of those problematic clauses in an award agreement and we negotiate them out so that you have maximum freedom in your project. And then sometimes related to grant awards or completely separate, you might be working maybe with an industry or a company or as part of a grant project. And maybe they're saying, we're going to need to share some confidential information with you. We want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Our office will take a look at that. And actually that kind of agreement is really with the institution, with the university and you. So ORSP takes a look at that. Again, we look for any of those problematic terms in there, we get them out, and then we get the signature for you. Similarly, sometimes when you're exchanging data between you and a granting agency or industry partner, there's something called a data transfer and use agreement or a material transfer agreement. We help review and get signatures on those kinds of agreements as well. Any questions about any of these services? Anything you didn't know about? No? Okay, good. All right. And then I kind of briefly touched on the process. So ORSP is here to help you prepare and submit your proposals. And as part of that preparation and leading up to submission, we do an internal routing. Because really, whenever a grant proposal goes out the door, it's going out under the umbrella of the university. It's the university's name on it. So what we do is there's an e-form that we initiate, and there's an email that we send. And it really just highlights the key points of your project. And it goes to your chair and your dean and on up to the provost. And that does a couple of really good things. It lets people know about the project and the key points of it. They have an opportunity to ask a question if they have a question. But then again, once you get that grant award, it's a smoother process to start your project. Everybody already knows what this is, what's involved. If you've got summer salary, your chair's planned for it. It's a great communication tool to make for a smoother process when your award gets started. And the other nice thing is that your leadership chain is seeing your name. They're seeing your research or creative activity, and they're seeing that you're taking that effort to submit an external proposal. So all good things to be sharing. And we do ask that you share a stable draft of any proposal or budget 5 business days before a deadline. That gives time for that routing to happen. And when I say stable, I mean that nothing big is going to be changing anymore. You might be wordsmithing, you might be, giving it that final proofread, that's okay, but that there wouldn't be any more big changes happening once the routing starts. And then again, our office typically uploads documents into that granting agency system. The university has accounts with a lot of the major granting agencies' submission systems. So we take care of the forms and the uploading your documents and actually pressing that submit button, because folks in ORSP are actually our institutional signatory. So they put their signature on it when it gets submitted. So we take care of that. And if you leave with only one takeaway today, I hope it's this: just come chat with us wherever you're at in the process. Even if you think it's too early, I'm not even sure what to ask, I just have a vague idea, that's okay. The earlier we can start talking and finding out what you're interested in, the more service we can provide. If I know that you have, this is your research interest and area, I can be on the lookout then for grants that maybe would fit that and just send you something from time to time. So the earlier we can have a conversation, the better. And that goes right up through to submitting a proposal, just being in contact. So now we've talked a lot about seeking external grants, how ORSP can help you. The other part of this presentation is thinking about how external grant seeking can feed into your professional development. So what does professional development mean? What are some things that come to your mind, just terms, if you think of professional development? Like I think of publishing, any other certificates, training, yeah. I have candy, did I mention? You get candy. Workshops, I'll let you pick. What about like actions we take as individuals to networking? Collaborating maybe, or mentoring as the case may be. Okay. Sure. Okay. All good words. And several of them you touched on. So professional development can mean different things to different people, but here's some common terms. It's everything from the actual research creative work that you're doing to presenting, disseminating that, to finding a collaborator, to the mentoring that you do with undergraduates, to just advancing your career. So all forms of professional development. So how does grant seeking help with just your core scholarly activity, which is core part of your career? So oftentimes when you write a grant proposal, you've created a plan of work. That plan of work is going to exist. You've taken the time to think through this thing you want to do. Whether you get that grant, you've now got a plan. So the act of writing that proposal has now created a plan that you can follow to advance your scholarly work. And then, of course, best case, if you do get that grant, you've got some grant funding that might help you advance your scholarly project faster, or further, or broader, or bring other people in on it. So there's a direct line to just your core scholarship. You can also serve your discipline through your grant seeking. One of the best ways to do this is to be a reviewer of grant proposals. So, for example, the National Science Foundation, they have hundreds of grant programs. They need hundreds upon hundreds of people to review for these grant programs. They have ways that you can put your name in, as do many other federal agencies and private funders. You can say, I'd like to be a reviewer. What's the process? Being a reviewer, especially when you've maybe found either a granting agency or a program within that agency that you're interested in, if you're become a grant reviewer for that program, it's like priceless what you can learn, because you get to read other people's proposals. You get to see how they've structured their arguments, what it takes to be persuasive, how those other reviewers are relating to, those different ways of presenting a message. You also get to have really direct contact with a program officer. Program officer is that person at the granting agency who's running these grant programs and running the review process. So if you're a reviewer, you're going to be working with that program officer. You're helping them. That's a lot of goodwill and a lot of good base of relationship building, so that then when you decide, now I'm going to submit a proposal to that program, you're already somewhat of a known entity. You already have an inroad. You already have that program officer that you can call and say, I was so pleased and proud to be a reviewer, and now I'm thinking about putting in my proposal. Could I have half an hour of your time to talk through and, get your feedback? So it can really help you create that relationship with the granting agency and the person at that agency, and give you that sneak peek of other people's proposals. I mean, sometimes that's just the most helpful thing ever, is to see how other people are pitching their idea. And it's all in service, right? These things can't happen without volunteers. Publishing. Here again, when you're writing a grant proposal, you're always going to have usually a section that talks about, the background of this issue, whatever the issue is. So you're going to be talking about, those who have come before you, the other common practices or methods, why this thing that you're proposing is a problem to solve. All of that kind of information that you've prepared and done a lit review for your grant proposal, you can repurpose a lot of that in, say, a journal article. You're not starting from scratch anymore. Similarly, if you have a book proposal that maybe you're working on for a publisher, there will be pieces from your grant proposal, like the timeline, again, the sort of gaps in the field, those kinds of pieces of information that you can be including in that book proposal. So you can recycle and repurpose your grant proposal to help with your publishing goals. Mentoring, of course. Again, in your proposal, if you were planning to include students, you've probably written up a beautiful mentoring plan. Whatever happens with that proposal, if it gets awarded or it doesn't, you have a mentoring plan that you can now implement, or at least pieces of it, perhaps. Another great thing about UW-Eau Claire is that we're a predominantly undergraduate institution, PUI. Mostly serve undergraduates here. There are grant programs that are especially designed for PUIs. National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health have grant programs that say, hey, predominantly undergraduate people, we understand you have different challenges and opportunities. Here's this grant program, You apply to it, and you're going to be reviewed with reviewers being given that background about what it means to be at a predominantly undergraduate institution. It's not an R1 institution. You're not going to be compared against R1 institutions that have very different environments. So because we're at a PUI, there can be different kinds of grant opportunities that recognize and reflect who we are and what we do, especially the undergraduate mentoring opportunities. And then also in your proposal budget, you can be including funding for students, which helps you advance your project further faster with more resources and more help. But it also means that more students are going to have this opportunity to do mentored research because you're bringing in these outside dollars. Networking, of course, in your proposal, you'll no doubt talk about how you're going to share, the products of your research or project. When you go to a conference, that's prime time to network. And there again, having a plan for your networking is one thing. Ideally, if you get the grant funding, you have grant money to get you to that conference to do that networking. Collaborating came up. Sometimes collaboration can really strengthen whatever your project idea is. Maybe there's a piece of knowledge that maybe is a gap for you, but your collaborator has, and together it's that great complement. Sometimes grant programs have all kinds of different eligibility rules. Maybe an institution of higher education is not eligible, but maybe a nonprofit institution is eligible for a grant program. And maybe you've been collaborating with somebody who is at a nonprofit. So you could open up your opportunities for grant programs by collaborating and therefore opening up your eligibility opportunities. And just, of course, basic advancing your career. The fact that you're submitting grant proposals, oftentimes just trying counts. I mean, that's an extra effort, putting together a proposal to seek outside resources, additional mentoring of students, and all those other things that we've talked about can all feed into and be things that you might include in your tenure promotion packet information to advance your overall career. And now we are at the audience participation portion. Yes.
You are a very good presenter and kept your time well, so I commend you for that. To what extent, if at all, do you work with people outside of the bounds of academic department?
That's a good question. We are number one here for all at the university. There is, I would say, a majority of people that we're working with are in academic departments, faculty. But we also work with people who are doing any number of programs that are helping students, for example. So things like McNair or even back in the day, Blue Gold Beginnings got started with some grant funding, and Upward Bound is a federally funded. So we're here to help anyone with the university seeking grant. A lot, and there are a lot of project ideas out there. I know. Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit to the professional development of those non-faculty, maybe academic staff who are seeking grants? Could you say a little about that?
Yeah. Well, I can use myself as an example. So our office recently applied to the National Science Foundation. And to prepare for that proposal, I got to be a reviewer for the National Science Foundation. And I can tell you firsthand, there are just so many benefits of that. I got to interact with people at all these other colleges across the United States. So that's a network builder for me. I now have some names and people that I could reach out to in similar offices doing similar things. So that's a major win in that networking. It also helped us refine, our proposal ideas by getting that insight and seeing how other people were presenting their projects. Created that relationship with that program officer, that person at NSF running that program, who there again, whether we get the funding or not, that person will be a critical connection to help us figure out our next steps. So I mean, I'm not faculty, I'm academic staff. But I had all those benefits, and it was part of my annual goals to do this proposal, and so that feeds into my performance review. That's one example.
Could you talk a little bit about what kinds of grants are like out there, like that exist in the world, kind of, I don't know, even just like generally
Yeah.
for things like program development,
Yeah.
like things that are not sort of maybe research focused, like
Yeah.
about a particular faculty member's research that
Yeah.
might fund, like
Yeah.
programming initiatives in departments that don't have as much money as they should have. Really cool stuff.
Yes. So
Do you think of any?
yes. So part of what we could explore is, talking more about what's the nature of the programming that you would want to offer. And then I would do a search. Oftentimes things that are more about programming or maybe a very specific type of student that you're trying to reach, or service that you're trying to provide to them, or et cetera. And then we would look for agencies, oftentimes for those kinds of more focused programming needs, we'll look to foundations as opposed to maybe federal government, not necessarily, but just as a general leaning. But they're out there. And sometimes you might have a program that's about doing, half a dozen things, and we might end up picking 2 of those that we bubble up and elevate because those 2 things happen to speak to a particular sponsor. So maybe, you want, maybe it's honors, I don't know. And historically underrepresented, and first years, and humanities. I'm just gonna. And maybe we find a sponsor that's really about those high achieving and first year students. So we've doubled down on those pieces. Your program's still your program. It's all going to benefit, but we might just elevate certain components of it to align with that particular grant program. So there definitely are sources of funding out there. And yeah, we could chat more.
I will follow up too. Do you ever, is it, I'm coming from a faculty field where like there's not a lot of, there historically has not been a lot of like, we don't rely on grants for it.
Okay.
But like, when faculty apply for research grants, are there ever components of it related to offering courses? You know what I mean? Is there ever like a, so what I'm thinking of
Yeah.
is like, we're a department that relies on people who are across campus offering
Yeah.
unique, innovative classes. Like,
Yeah.
is that a thing that ever happens where like a faculty's applying for a research grant, but there's like a part of it that's going
Yeah.
to be class or?
Absolutely. The research and the curricular can complement, of course, can be both included in a proposal or separate. So those curricular pieces can definitely be part of a grant project. And your budget then can include figuring out the ways to make that feasible, right? Somebody gets a course release over here and ways to make it happen. So yes, there are models for that. Would you like? Good question. I'll let you pick. Yeah.
Are there any kind of like indicators, I guess, when people are kind of starting a research project that, it might serve them better to apply for an external grant rather than searching or trying to get funds through the university?
I like that question. Thank you. You take
Hear what that question was.
All right. So what are ways that people can think about, we have some internal grant programs through the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, and then there are all these external programs. What guidance might we give people about where to start or how to think about what's best? I think one of the messages we like to share is that internal programs can be a great way to get started. Whether you're brand new here, kind of get started, or maybe you're going down a new research path and you just want to get some pilot data going. Those internal programs can be great for things like that. But internal programs can't really sustain your whole research career. They're just not enough, and there's a high demand, and they're trying to serve everyone to some extent. So that's where we can sort of look at an internal grant might be that great place to get some pilot data or to try something. And then you have that sort of proof of concept. And then you can take that and you'll have a stronger external grant proposal because you can say, last year I did A and B and C and all the indicators were good. And now with more funding resources from this external group, I can take it to the next level. So I think the internal become that springboard rather than an ongoing source of support for any one person or one project.
So I accidentally did not controverted all of the rules about applying for something last year. So because the thing we were applying for was so small, it did not occur to me that your office actually wanted to be involved. So like, what are the like when people are applying for like, I don't know, very small, like we're applying for $300 or whatever, or if you're applying for something like that is really just like the faculty member traveling or something like that, like a library fellowship or something like that. Like what are the, how do we know when we go to you guys, or if you want it to always for us to do it? I don't know.
Yes, and I appreciate that question. So how do people know when they need to work through ORSP versus when it's like no dollar, small dollar, don't need to? So the answer is please come and chat with us, whatever it is. If you're thinking of applying to something, whether it's a $50 travel supplement or a no dollar, like in-kind something, whatever it is, so that you don't have to, take that time vacillating, I don't know, just share it with us. We'll take a look and we'll let you know. We want to do that. The basic process, it doesn't matter how much money, there's no threshold, like, whether it's $50 or $5 million. If it's money coming to the university, we would follow our process. Sometimes though, it's not even about money, but it's some kind of commitment happening that there again, we can help make sure that you're protected and that whoever needs to know whatever about it does in advance. So yeah, just send us the link and say, is this something your office, helps us with? And we'll let you know.
And when you say your office?
Well, me, ORSP, and me. I mean, you can email me directly because we've met now, or the ORSP mailbox. Either way is good.
If all things go well, from the time you pick a grant to apply for to the time you submit, what is like the average? Is it months, days, weeks?
Yes.
Okay.
That's also a very good timing question. So when you think about grants, how much time from you find your grant, you submit it, you get an award? It varies, of course, but typically I'd say at least think in a 6-month. From the time that you submit your proposal to the time that you know if you're getting an award, 6 months is fairly common. And I definitely say that about federal funding, but that can be true even for foundations. It can be a long game. So you might start thinking about a project that you want to seek external funding for today. Maybe we find something really quickly and you apply next month. Still probably in practice not going to be starting that project till spring, summer. So it is really important to think about, and that's something, I try to help with is looking at those guidelines. When we find that grant program and maybe it looks perfect and beautiful, but maybe it just doesn't align at all with your timeline, or at least as you were originally envisioning it. But better to plan for that and adapt before submitting the proposal.
And then the actual writing time of the grant.
Oh, the writing?
For 6 months?
No, I mean, well, that really varies by the person. How long will it take a person to write the proposal? A lot of variety there too. Some proposals are, basically a form with some text boxes and maybe there's a 500-word limit and a few of those, and you can, process that pretty quickly, maybe in a weekend. But others are much more robust and have other parts and pieces. So it varies by how complex the application is. And it also varies by, a teaching load, other commitments, So there's a variety there, but it is a really good thing to take into consideration early is how much time do you have to commit to the writing? How robust of an application process is it? What are some of those other parts and pieces that you might have to prepare in addition to just that core narrative? And creating a timeline for yourself is also super helpful. You know, this is my hard end date. How do I back off of that and create enough time for myself to meet that deadline? Oh, okay, thank you. Everyone is welcome. It's just some candy. 'Tis the season.
Yeah.
And yeah, contact info is there, but you can also find me in the directory. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.